All right, welcome, Om. Can you start off with a brief introduction? What's your name? What's your grade? What school you're in? And what are some extracurriculars you like to do in your free time?
Hi, my name is Om Gulati. I am an incoming freshman at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I will be studying computer science over there. Um, I think some things I do for fun slash like extracurricular activities include robotics, teaching, um, and just honestly nerdy coding stuff, if you know what I mean, building things, engineering activities, messing with Raspberry Pis, things like that.
Cool. Are you familiar with the concepts of generative AI? And could you explain Gen AI from your understanding?
From my understanding, Gen AI is just basically AI that just generates things like videos, audio, text, anything that it does to just generate. Yeah.
Do you usually use Gen AI? In what scenarios and how often do you use Gen AI?
Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but ChatGPT would count as Gen AI, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so then I use ChatGPT. I often use it as kind of like a search engine, kind of like Google, where you search things. I use ChatGPT in the same way where whenever I'm trying to do some research for any sort of papers out to write for high school and college, I normally use that as like a source to like gather more sources, if you know what I mean.
Hmm. How often do you use ChatGPT?
Actually not very often. I'd say no more than like once a month in the past, and I haven't really touched it in a couple of months actually.
How would you evaluate the pros and cons between ChatGPT and Google or other search engines that you use?
So in the past, whenever I used to use Google, it felt like a seamless experience where it would always give me the search I wanted, and I would use its special like search terms because they have like things you can add on to it to make searches more specific, like get more scholarly sources, for instance. However, over time, I've noticed that Google hasn't provided the same experience, where some of the searches just feel random. Like I know everyone's seen the recent meme. Well, ever since Reddit and Google have merged, for instance, people have seen the meme where someone searched up I'm feeling depressed or something like, and then Reddit's AI jumped in and said, you should jump off the Golden Gate Bridge or something, right? I've been receiving lots of searches like that. So that's when I started moving towards ChatGPT more for research. And over there, I realized that it just felt like the sources that it would give me whenever I'd ask for them, they'd normally be spot on or at least be related to the topic, you know? So I think that's like the big difference I see between the two for me.
How would you rate the accuracy of the information that ChatGPT had provided to you in your experience?
Honestly, for the research that I've used it for, it's been quite accurate. I'd say like on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like at an 8 or a 9. The only real issues I've had with it is that it's just not giving me the information I want, but it's accurate.
That's cool. So it sounds like you use GPT to do some preliminary research
That is my
and just
biggest
quickly
use.
gather information.
Yep, that's my biggest use. Before I start doing anything, any sort of like paper or anything, I often go on to ChatGPT to like brain collect a bunch of sources as like a starting point.
Oh, do you use it to code? What's your experience coding with GPT?
In the past, I used to use Unity quite a bit to develop games. And I think I used ChatGPT to generate like some code when it like originally became popular for it, and it
Hmm.
was quite good. I also used it once for an assignment for one of my CS classes, where we were making a game too. So in that assignment, um, the experience was decent. It was kind of messy, the code, like the format of it just wasn't how I like to format my code personally, but that makes sense. But the code was pretty accurate. I had to make a couple small tweaks, but it gave me a good like starting point.
That's good. That's good. Um, If Gen AI is being widespread in academias, what are some concerns that you foresee? Do you think the use of generative AI might hinder students' development of essential skills? And could you name a few skills?
I think the biggest skill so from what I've noticed, a lot of students oftentimes use sources like Chat GPT or other Gen AI to just do the entire assignment for them, basically remove any of the thinking and aspects, right? So I'm afraid that Gen AI is going to get popular amongst elementary schoolers, and they won't really be, or even middle schoolers, like sixth graders, and they won't be able to have the opportunity to learn how to like scavenge the internet, check for like, I guess, chat. I don't know how to explain it, but almost like they won't be able to like,
Gather the information as effectively by
yeah,
themselves?
yeah, basically, like they won't be able to use other search engines. They won't be able to read the articles because oftentimes what ChatGPT does, or you can tell it to do, is you can just say, "Give me a summary of this article," or "Give me a summary of what you researched," or what's in your database, I guess, right? And they won't have the ability to synthesize all this information because ChatGPT is going to do it for them. And I think that's just not a good thing at all, especially early on.
In terms of intellectual properties, would you say that the contents generated by say ChatGPT belongs to the user?
No. So correct me if I'm wrong, but whenever what ChatGPT often does is it scrounges the internet and goes from and gathers its like stuff, its information from other people, right? And it just warps some of the language sometimes at the
Mm.
most, right? I don't think that's okay. I think that's plagiarism.
Um,
And it's actually one of my other concerns. I know this for a fact because again, I've been a high school student. I've seen others do it. Oftentimes people just take whatever ChatGPT says and pastes it and think it's their own content. And then they forget to cite the actual people that wrote it or the actual article where they got their information from or anything along those lines. That's illegal. You can't be doing that. I'm scared that a lot of us are forming bad habits to just not cite others' works and give them credit, which is another big issue, I think.
so you're saying if a student entered a prompt into ChatGPT and the GPT generated an essay for them, the essay is not their intellectual property and it's plagiarism?
See, that's where I think there's like a slight gray area. Like from the scenario you posed, I don't think it's necessarily their work. But it also depends on like the actual content that you're asking it to generate. Like I think there needs to be like a standard of rules, set defined rules, but I don't have a good answer for that because I go back and forth, to be honest. Because to me, it feels like it's plagiarized, but at the same time, you're it really does depend on the content. For instance, like if it's like someone's thoughts on like Hamlet or something like that, or like any other Shakespearean play, and it's like a Marxist analysis or something, for instance, I think that's plagiarism because they didn't think of it and it has to have your own opinion. But if it's like citing something like facts, like how to write a network command or something through putty, like, is it plagiarism? You know what I mean?
So, more opinionated like essays or comments are plagiarisms, but things that have kind of like a fixed answer are not considered as much.
I think so. I think that's where I'm trending towards, but obviously there's issues with that too, and it really needs to be defined.
Say the prompt is the students need to write an open-ended essay, and student A entered a very simplistic prompt into ChatGPT, maybe basically copy the question over and then ask it to generate an essay for them. But student B entered a very elaborated prompt. They crafted the prompt with context and other background informations, and claim evidence and everything you need to write an essay. And then the GPT basically wrote and connect the points for them to generate the essay. Is there a difference between student A and student B when you're considering the intellectual properties? Would you say the work belongs to the students in one scenario but not the other?
I believe so. So in student B, correct me if I'm wrong, they've already done the thinking. They've already written it. They just need to add things like transitions, for instance, right? I think that's a great place to be for AI to be used because it's almost like the dirty work, if you know what I mean. Unless that is what the student is being graded on, whether they can do it by themselves or not. For instance, like you learn a lot of these writing skills in middle school, right? I don't think that's a good place to be using AI. But once you enter high school or college, I see zero issue with a student doing so.
Um, Okay, so for the next few questions, we're gonna make the assumptions that all the students are using Gen AI as a tool to do the dirty work, kind of like how math students use calculators as a tool to skip the very hard calculation part.
That's an
Um,
amazing analogy, in my opinion.
yep. Thanks. So yeah, so so calculators were seen as a way of cheating, but then it got normalized in academia in math classes because the educational like policymakers they were able to decouple the algebra, the thinking part, and the hard math, which calculators can help to like speed up the process. So that's how calculators became normal and widespread in academia. Can you see similar things happen for Gen AI?
Absolutely, because again, once again, I think that's a perfect analogy. The way I see it, calculators just I think another thing, I could be completely wrong about this, but from what I heard from my math professors is that calculators and further math are allowed and are often needed to do work. And oftentimes the fundamental skills that are taught, you're not expected to do them by hand in math anymore. Like for instance, taking like a complex derivative in calculus, oftentimes it's just done by calculators in the future once you're in higher like levels of study, right? And the way I see it, AI is the same thing. In higher levels of study, you don't necessarily need to be using that time doing the dirty work like transitions. And I think it's going to go in a similar way.
Um, what do you think are some possible ways that students can demonstrate that they have invested efforts into doing the analytical thinking and intellectual thinking while using ChatGPT?
That's a really tough question. Um, hmm. I think the biggest part is almost like creating like some sort of rubric where they can demonstrate. So for instance, in like when they're writing an essay, right? Maybe have them first paste into like a separate box what they're going to input into ChatGPT. I think that's the biggest thing. ChatGPT does what you tell them to do. So maybe just a place where you just copy and paste your chats with ChatGPT. I think that's a great way to just it's like a foolproof plan then, right? Where it shows what you did. It's like a whole log. And that way, um, I guess you can say there's no academic dishonesty. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but I think it would work because that way a professor can just point out or a teacher that this is a bad use of chat GPT because you used X words and you know what I mean?
So basically evaluating how students can craft and articulate prompts.
Kinda. So basically, instead of checking to see how they're doing, check to see how they're using the AI instead. And your proof is the chat logs, because most AIs, not all, but a lot of them are chat based, right? Especially like ChatGPT, the most popular one out there among
Mhm.
students, right? So just a place to copy and paste the logs when you submit the assignment. That way, if a teacher feels like there's AI involved, they can look through the logs to see whether it was used or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. If let's consider this from a teacher's point of view. So if you are a teacher or if you're the policymakers in education, how would you change your ways of teaching and teaching standards to adapt to the integration of AI?
I think the biggest thing is I think something that's always been exposed to us is something like citation machine from Purdue, right? That's like a form of AI, right? So something I've noticed some teachers start to do from my high school, Newport High School, what at the end of the year was remove the standard where you have to like cite every single source because citation machine in the future is going to do it for you all the time, right? So things like that. So less skills related to grammar. That doesn't mean to stop teaching grammar, but it means when you're actually grading an essay, grade it more about the actual thought rather than um, the rudimentary fundamental skills of writing. I guess that's my best answer I could give you, but because I think something
Um,
I have noticed is that most people use AI for this kind of stuff, like Grammarly, just to do once again the dirty work for them, right? And I don't see an issue with that personally.
I think your opinions are in a lot of cases based from a incoming college student's point of view
Mhm.
because when you're saying that we can use Gen AI to skip kind of the hard works. I think you're kind of referring to the process of writing and doing all the transitions, making sure the grammars are correct. But doing those just purely by the humans is also kind of necessary sometimes. Do you think there's a
That's true.
do you think where do you think will be the best place to draw the line between like where students have to do everything by themselves versus when students can use Gen AI to do some of the hard works for them? Where do you think the line should be drawn? Maybe like a grade, for example. Does that kind of make sense?
I think so. I think what I would personally do is oftentimes teachers make us write, um, if we're still in the topic about essay writing, they often make us write 2 to 3 or 4 essays per year, right? Um, make one of the essays where they just have to do it by hand. Make that the introduction essay, make that the first essay of the year, and then over time bring in AI so that it's like, you know what I mean? Where uh or
Mhm.
you could actually reverse the order where they can start with AI and then they can build up the skills so that they learn to eventually use rudimentary skills like grammar and stuff too. So basically change the level of AI allowage. Maybe the first essay you write is all in paper, and the last essay you have to submit through a computer.
Um, I guess like one of the implicit assumption that you made is that like after college, you don't see a problem in people using Gen AI as a writing tool to do the dirty works for them. So would you say like college is the line between like before college students need to do more of the writing works by themselves, but after college, students
I'd say near
could
the end of
use
high
more
school.
the
I'd
end
say
of high
like a
school?
year before, maybe like junior year, because I do want to make sure that our those coming out of high school are well equipped to know how to properly use AI to help them through the process because AI is a really powerful tool. And oftentimes schools are blamed for not teaching students real world applications, like for instance, just doing your taxes. I feel like AI is kind of like the same, where it's turning into such a powerful tool that you have to give some exposure to students. So I think junior year or even sophomore year would be a good line.
Cool. Um, So there's a lot of ongoing controversies on the topic of AI, and there are teachers, especially those from liberal arts background, teaching LA language arts histories. They usually impose like policies that 100% ban AI in the presence in their classrooms. From a CS students, from a STEM students point of view, do you have anything to say to them? about the use of Gen AI and how people should and should not use them.
I think a good example would be my teacher, Mr. Lasby. He was my English teacher last year. He taught senior English. And I remember at the very start of the year, he was very against like AI usage. He made us write that essay using paper and using like a book, right? And even I think in our second essay, I think he banned ChatGPT too then. But something he did note is that it's a really good way to like synthesize thoughts. It's a good way to get sources. Um and I think what you got to understand is eventually in the future, as AI gets stronger, I don't know when that's going to be. Maybe it's in the next 5 years, maybe it's in the next 50. It'll start taking over even more things a part of our life. So I think it's really crucial to allow students to get a chance uh, to experience how these AIs work, just so that they don't fall behind in the future. And there's benefits to it. Like for instance, if I'm like an art teacher, a benefit to from allowing AI is just inspiration. It's once again, it's like a search engine, right? So it can provide inspiration to your students. Now, the hope is that they don't end up copying the entire thing, and that's where you have to uh impose ethics and morals, right? But
Mm.
it's like a good way to gain inspiration. It's a good way to get a starting point. I think that's my biggest thing. I don't think ChatGPT writes good essays for the record. I tried generating an essay once, did not go too well, like at all. Like it felt like the writing was cheap. It felt like it wasn't good. So ChatGPT is clearly not at that place yet, in my opinion. But it's provided a great starting point for many people, and I think it'll continue to do so.
If there's one thing you could change about how Mr. Lasby structured the class assignments for you, what would you change about it?
Um, I think the biggest thing was he was so scared of AI that he wouldn't even let us use our computers and crammed everything in 2 weeks because of this. This assignment, according to former students, they used to get more time or a little less time to do it, but they'd get to take it to do it at homework. There was such a strict policy imposed in class where no laptops for 2 straight weeks. If we see your phone out for even like 5 seconds, we're gonna rip up your entire essay. It just struck fear, and it made people not want to do the class. And I think there needs to be a way to moderate this. Like for instance, I believe they use class policy. Class policy, for those who don't know, is just like a tool to like moderate computer screens. They
Hmm.
already use this tool to begin with. Why can't they just turn it on, and if someone uses it, it's an issue? You know what I mean? Because I know a lot of people struggle to turn in an assignment on time slash finish it by the due date simply because they kept having to write, and their process includes typing.
Um, that concludes my list of questions. We're on time is 27. I want to ask you for like the feedbacks you have on this conversation. What opinions do you have in general? And if I'm also interviewing other people with the same set of questions, do you think I should add other questions that people should answer?
Honestly, Tony, I think this was an amazing interview. You're a great moderator. Um,
Thank you.
Honestly, I think this was a really cool set of questions. I think it was like perfect. Think maybe a thing you could add is maybe a couple more examples of like morality, especially when we get into the gray areas, right? Like I think you asked me a question along the lines of like, I guess provide more examples. I'm forgetting the exact question, but just a couple smaller more examples. But that's mostly because I don't uh and maybe a little bit more time to think of like a response, but that's about it. Might just be me rushing. I'm scared.
Okay, cool. So I think the part you were talking about is when I asked about the intellectual properties when one student have a
Oh,
simple prompt and the other one have a very articulated one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I should more examples.
Yeah, just
along
like an
those lines.
example of like an example response, right? Because I'm one of those people that needs like an example response so I could like form how to like phrase things, if you know what I
Hmm.
mean. Otherwise, you did amazing, Tony.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Um, also, what do you think will be a better way to have the interview to have more time to think about each question?
Um, I think um honestly, this might sound a little stupid, but just like even think of like a timer being like, you have 25 seconds to respond. But that's just
Okay.
because I love structured conversations where
Mhm.
it's like, I know what's going on. But otherwise, honestly, it wasn't a big issue, like at all. That's just me saying feedback for the sake of saying feedback.
Cool.
But I think it was fine.
And the final question, do you have any referrals as to some people I should interview about this issue? The cohort I'm interviewing right now is the students population, so
Mhm.
other students, perhaps those in STEM who have a very strong background in AI, or even those in liberal arts but have a very strong opinion on this issue.
You know Harry, right? I think Harry would be a great person to interview. Otherwise, I know Ethan's like a huge user of generative AI. Like I know he uses ChatGPT for research. In fact, he's probably the
Ethan.
one who exposed me a lot. Yeah, shorter. I think mm, honestly, anyone from the programming team and NRG would be good. I know they all use ChatGPT a lot. Kiara. Um, I think it could even be cool to get. I know you're talking about students right now, but maybe even like an opinion from someone who's like in the industry. So like maybe asking someone like Mr. Reed or Davis just to see how if AI was in their time or like how do they because I know they often like recruit people like Mr. Reed has like an intern, for instance.
Mhm.
Maybe see how he views AI in the workspace in a STEM lens. But
Yeah, 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 definitely. Our first cohort, I have a partner who's working with me on this project. Our first cohort is the student population, second is the teachers, and the third is the industry workers.
oh, perfect.
Yeah, yeah. So
Got you, got you,
I
got
want to
you.
gather some very diverse informations, but yeah.
Yeah. I name mostly STEM. I know people that are going into STEM, but asking maybe someone like do you know Sabrina Lim?
I don't have a personal connections with her, but I can definitely reach out.
Yeah, or Hayden Lee. I think those would be good people.
Cool, cool.
Rita.
Okay, I'll end the recording.